Stone setting in jewelry is one of the most important things you can do. Whether the stone is used as an accent piece or as the focal, knowing how to set the stone properly is a big deal. Also, developing that skill is a big deal. Now, I will be the first to admit I am still just barely beginning, just learning. So don't judge my skills too harshly yet. However, we have had a lot of questions both in my online groups on Facebook and online workshops, as well as through private messages of how to set stones. So I've teamed up with Guess Wine, a company that has been serving our jewelry community for nearly 100 years and is a multi-generational family business. They're great people at Guess Wine. And I have partnered with them to come up with this video for you, showing how I will create a 7mm stone in a 6-prong solitaire setting. So join me now as we walk through the entire process of taking a ring, cutting it off of a cast tree, all the way through the polishing and the stone setting process. First thing is to remove the rings from the tree. I use two main methods, either a small bolt cutter or a jeweler's saw. Once the ring has been removed, I use a fairly coarse file to remove the sprue connection point and shape that area where it was attached. You can see the difference between where we started and where we are now. Next, I will use a sanding stick to remove a lot of the texture left over from the casting process. In preparation for cleaning up the prongs, I load a snap-on mandrel and a medium grit sanding disc. Taking the time to properly clean everything up is imperative. It will take quite a bit of time, but it is worth the effort. I begin by cleaning up each side of the prong, working around the ring in a counterclockwise position. And then I will work on the other side of the prong, working in a clockwise position until I have removed all of the casting texture on the sides of each prong and am left with a smooth finish. I will then move to the outside of the prong, following the same process, blending as I go. Once I have finished with the sanding disc, I move to a radial bristle disc, which is impregnated with a fine abrasive to further refine the surface from the last step. I really concentrate on the outside of the head and the sides of the prongs in this step. To clean up and prep the inside of the ring, I will work through various grits of sandpaper rolls, which are strips of sandpaper rolled up and glued into a mandrel for easy sanding of the interior spaces of the ring. I begin with about a 220 grit and will work my way through to about 1000 grit for a nice pre-finish. Make certain that you clean up all the sharp edges that can develop where the sides meet the inside of the ring. One thing to note is when you are sanding, you need to change the direction in which you are sanding to fully remove the scratches left from the previous step. This can be hard to do on a ring, so you can angle the sanding band to about 30 to 45 degrees and that should be sufficient. Use a silicone or rubber bullet to clean up the insides of the prongs. When doing this, be sure you are working safely and wear a mask or work in a vacuum environment to ensure that you do not breathe the abrasive dust that is created. Once I am happy with the overall blending and smoothness of the ring, I then move to a fine Eve wheel, which is an accessory, to do some final blending and pre-polishing. Once again, I concentrate on each side of the prong and also all the surfaces of the head, and finally move on to the surface of the ring. I then use a bullet-shaped Eve accessory for the insides of the head. Next, I then use the Luxor green polishing compound, which has a medium abrasive to help remove the scratches and aids in the blending. I begin by polishing the ring surface with a stitched muslin buff in my rotary tool. This is going to give a really beautiful pre-finish. I pay close attention to the prongs and the head, and for the inside, I have used a horsehair end brush, but you could also use a felt accessory for a little more aggressive touch. Then I switch to a white goat hair brush, which is soft and will apply a Luxor white compound, which is used for fine finishing and polishing. Once my ring has its final finish, it is time to set our stone. I start by setting the stone upside down on the prongs to see how it fits. It should just sit barely on the top of the inside of the prongs. Then I begin by filing the tops of the prongs to make sure everything is the same level and all prongs are aligned properly. After filing, I check the fit of the stone again on top of the prongs. Flip the stone over and measure from the edge of the girdle to the edge of the table. This is going to give us the depth of our seat. Using the dividers, I mark the inside of each prong with the measurement I just took. Next, I measure the stone and select a burr that is about 20% smaller than the stone. Now, if I were using a 4-prong setting, I would have selected a 5.5mm burr. But because I am working with a 6-prong setting, I'm going to select just a slightly smaller burr, and I have chosen to use a 5mm burr. When selecting burrs, there are so many to choose from. However, I really like the quality and the cut that I get from Busch burrs, and that is what I'm using in this particular video. With my burr in motion, I introduce the edge where the pavilion slope meets the bottom of the cutting shaft at an angle to the scribed line. Then, slowly keeping the burr continuously in motion, I move the burr up and parallel to the prong. Now, more experienced stone setters can get this cut made the first time. As I am not that experienced yet, I tend to do a little bit, check it, do a little bit more, and repeat, making certain to pay attention to keeping things uniform. Try to fit our stone. Now, if you need to, we have to go back and remove a little more, as is the case here. In this case, I have still just a little bit more to go as the stone sits just a little bit too high in this setting. Once again, I'm going to remove a little bit more and then test the fit of the stone again. Once we have the setting cut to the right depth, we need to then check to see that the stone fits flat and that it doesn't rock within the setting. Then I'm going to pick up my ring and I'm going to check it from all the sides. I'm checking to see that again the stone is sitting flat, it fits well within the prongs, and the pavilion and girdle sit properly in the seat I have just cut. I like to use a marker to mark the top of problem prongs, so this way I know which one to go back and alter. I want to be careful not to thin the prong out too much. I should not be removing more than about 50% of the thickness of the prong. One more time, I'm going to test the stone and look for all of the same, a proper fit, a straight stone, no rocking, etc. You may need to go back and touch up a prong or two and then repeat this process. Once all adjustments have been made and I'm happy with the fit of the stone, I position the stone so that the table is oriented properly and begin to close the prongs using prong closing pliers. Prong closing pliers have small grooves that nestle the prongs and allow you to give a little pressure and direct the prong down onto the stone. Notice that I have not pushed the prongs down completely, and I also kind of work around the stone the way I would lug nuts on a tire. So you want to start with one, move to the opposite side and do that prong, select the next prong, and again move to the opposite side of that. I like to file just a little of the upper outer edge to help the metal move over the stone a little easier. Again, being careful not to remove too much. Once more, I am aiming to keep about 50% thickness of the original prong. Once I'm happy with how my prongs are moving, I then use my engraving machine with a brass pusher to move the prongs down onto the stone. This can also be accomplished with a hammer handpiece or even a hammer and punch. Once the prongs are securely folded over the stone and they have a good fit, I use a file to then shape my prongs. In this case, I have given them a rounded finish, but there are a number of other finishes that you can put on your prongs. Next up, I'm going to use a rubber wheel to blend and remove any file marks. I also touch up any marks on any other area of the ring and the head. For this final step, I am using a stitched, combed muslin buff and Luxor white finishing compound to give the final polish. It does not take much compound at all, and a light pressure should be applied. In the case of my ring, the stone is a CZ and the compound will not hurt it, so I polish every surface of the ring.